Hi, this is Dr. D, and today we will talk about the current evidence of coronavirus origin. I am a GP in the UK, and on my YouTube channel I talk about common illnesses and conditions that we see in general practice. This video is not for doctors, but for patients, where I explain the current knowledge and latest research. If you want to receive updates about the new videos on my channel, please click subscribe and notifications buttons. Today we will talk about the current evidence of coronavirus origin, the genetic evidence that was collected by the laboratories in the world that suggests where the virus has come from. There are many theories of COVID origins, including several conspiracy theories, and today I will discuss which of them are backed by real data and hard genetic evidence. We will find out where the virus has come from and whether it was tampered with. Let's start. The mystery of the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. Perhaps it was after all an accident in the laboratory. The virus has spread all over the world. Was it really transmitted to humans naturally? Or did it escape from a secret laboratory in Wuhan? A 56-year-old virologist, Zengli, at the Institute of Virology in Wuhan, spent many years walking for hours in the subtropical provinces of southern China, climbing into humid and foul-smelling caves in search of one particular virus, the virus that triggered the SARS epidemic in Southeast Asia in 2002, the first coronavirus that turned out to be truly dangerous to humans. SARS kept the humankind at bay for several months. Its mortality rate was 10%, which is much higher than mortality in today's pandemic, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. So, the scientists wanted to better prepare for the next outbreak of coronavirus. And they tried to figure out how the virus passed on to humans. The researchers identified the so-called intermediate host of the SARS virus. It turned out to be a civet, from which the virus was transmitted to humans in one of the wild animal markets in Guangdong province. It took Zengli and her team more than 10 years to finally unravel the mystery. The virus that was so actively searched for was found in a cave near Kunming in fecal samples of a horseshoe bat. It was 97% identical to the virus found in the body of a civet. Over the years of searching for the origin of the SARS virus, Zengli has amassed a huge collection of coronaviruses. She is experimenting with some of them. She combines two viruses with different properties into a hybrid, thus creating artificial pathogens. The idea is to modify viruses in such a way that they have become more infectious and deadly to humans. It sounds creepy, but there is good intention behind it. Researchers are trying to be one step ahead of nature. Experiments are being carried out in a high-security laboratory in the center of Wuhan, a metropolis with a population of 11 million. The idea is to create a mutation that can naturally occur later, so the researchers can gain an advantage in the development of vaccines or drugs should a new virus emerge. The Institute of Virology in Wuhan is one of the leading institutes in the world for such research. Zengli assumed that sooner or later an outbreak of a new coronavirus would occur, but she expected it to happen in one of the southern provinces, as in the case of SARS, where bats are swarming with coronaviruses. The outbreak came as a surprise in Wuhan, more than 1,000 kilometers to the northeast. The question of whether the virus escaped from her laboratory kept her awake for many nights. She spent days studying the databases of her laboratory, again checking all the experiments, even investigating hazardous laboratory waste, until she was convinced none of the viruses in her laboratory did not match what was found in patients in hospitals in Wuhan. That is, the virus did not come from her laboratory. Zengli calmed down and began to help in decoding the genome of the virus, which was published on January 11, 2020. But soon the Chinese researcher stumbled across her database on the nucleotide sequence of a gene from another virus, which she discovered during one of her many forays into southern China. This virus was 96.2% identical to the new coronavirus from Wuhan. And it is to this day the closest relative of SARS-CoV-2. In February 2020, she and her colleagues reported their groundbreaking discovery in the journal Nature. They named that virus RATC13, after the Latin word for bat, Rhinolophus affinis, the place where the virus was found, Tungan, and the year it was discovered, 2013. But a group of scientists from all over the world, sharing information on Twitter under the hashtag DRASTIC, found something suspicious. The community wondered why the complete rat13 genome was only published in February 2020, while it was compiled back in 2013. And why did the authors not disclose in the article the exact place of detection of the coronavirus, but indicated only the region? Rosanna Zegrito, a young virologist at the University of Innsbruck, was the first to establish an amazing connection. The published rat13 genome is exactly the same as the genome that the Institute of Virology already mentioned in one of its earlier publications, but then under a completely different name. Scientists from hashtag DRASTIC continued their investigation, and found something amazing. The rat13 trail does not lead to a cave, but to a former copper mine in Mojiang in Yunnan province, that is the starting point of today's pandemic. In the supplementary material to a publication published last November in the journal Nature, Zengli and her colleagues finally confirmed the hashtag DRASTIC research. The story of the Mojiang copper mine is kind of the main piece of evidence for those who believe that a laboratory accident could have caused the pandemic, or even consider this version a priority. The story is as following: in April 2012, 6 workers were sent to clean up the abandoned mine. For 2 weeks, they carefully cleared the mine entrance to remove the thick layer of bat feces that had formed here over the years. Then all 6 workers fell ill, were hospitalized in a university hospital in Kunming with severe pneumonia, and some of them had to be put on ventilators. 3 of the hospitalized workers eventually died of the disease. All this is strikingly reminiscent of the course of COVID-19. Last year, Indian researcher Monali K. Rahalkar, also a member of the hashtag DRASTIC community, came across a diagnosis made at that time in a work written in Chinese. The mentioned 6 workers were likely to have contracted a virus similar to SARS, likely originating from horseshoe bats. To investigate the virus, in 2013 Zengli decided to explore the mine in Mojiang herself. Together with her team, she collected over 1,000 virus samples and stored their genome in her database in Wuhan. But Zengli came to an unexpected conclusion: none of these pathogens could have caused the workers to get sick. In a supplement from the publication in November last year, she writes that the workers' blood samples were subsequently tested for SARS-CoV-2 as well. But the tests were also negative. In an interview with Scientist American, she attributed the workers' severe pneumonia to a fungal disease. Eventually, she acknowledged that rat13, the virus closest to SARS-CoV-2, came from a copper mine in Mojiang. In 2012, there were several cases of severe lung disease with symptoms similar to COVID-19. 3 out of 6 patients died, but Zengli concluded that the cause of death was not one of the many SARS viruses in the mine, but a fungal disease. Her diagnosis contradicts the assessment of a lung specialist consulted by Kunming Hospital in 2012. This raises many questions. But regardless of the cause of death of the 3 workers, there is no doubt that the virus, named rat13, has been in the possession of the Institute of Virology in Wuhan since 2013. The US government suggests that experiments with this virus have been carried out since at least 2016 and probably continued until the end of 2019. This is stated in a briefing prepared in January last year in cooperation with the US intelligence services. At the same time, a short article appeared on a small website, an inconspicuous work of a graduate of the South China University of Technology. In it, the author Batao Xiao concludes that the new coronavirus probably originated in a laboratory in Wuhan. An employee at the Wuhan Center for Disease Control and Prevention was twice attacked by a bat, once the employee was in contact with blood, and the other time with bat urine. Realizing the danger, the laboratory worker voluntarily quarantined for 2 weeks on both occasions. Although the 2 incidents in Wuhan did not occur at the Xi Institute, it is also mentioned in the article. The student's work was soon removed from the network, but it can still be accessed by searching the archive. Later, Batao Xiao told the American media that he voluntarily removed the article because his conclusion was not based on his own research, but mainly on articles in Chinese newspapers. A little later, about 24 scientists from around the world showed solidarity with the researcher Zengli, publishing their position on February 18, 2020 in the scientific journal Lancet. But behind this initiative is the American zoologist Peter Daszak, the head of the Eco-Health Alliance, a New York-based non-governmental organization. Daszak is well acquainted with Zengli. They have been conducting joint research projects for more than 15 years. In a joint paper published in the journal Nature, they tell how they were the first to isolate a SARS-like coronavirus from a bat, which is able to attach directly to a human cell. From this they concluded that there is no need for an intermediate owner to achieve the human infection. Together with fellow co-author Ralph Barrick, Zengli published yet another high-profile study in 2015. It demonstrates how an artificial hybrid of two different coronaviruses binds particularly effectively to cells in the human respiratory tract. At the beginning of the year, after months of tough negotiations with Chinese authorities, a WHO research group went on an inspection trip to Wuhan. One of the members of the international delegation was Peter Daszak, a longtime colleague of Zengli. This aroused suspicion among some. The American government, then still under Trump's leadership, offered 3 experienced experts to WHO. All 3 were refused, and the WHO appointed Daszak instead. At the end of March, the WHO research group presented its final report, indicating that COVID epidemic is unlikely due to a laboratory accident. The researchers would rather focus their study on the origins of the supply of frozen food to the Wuhan market. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken told CNN that the Chinese government apparently had a hand in writing this final report. Scientists also expressed their suspicions. In an open letter published in the New York Times, they pointed the flaws in the final WHO report. Rosanna Zegrito also signed the open letter. In an interview with the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, she identified 2 of the most important requirements in her opinion: ensuring free access to the copper mine in Mojiang and to laboratory data. At the start of the pandemic, the focus was initially on one of the many Chinese markets selling wild animals, the Wuhan seafood market in Wuhan. The market is located about 12 kilometers from the Institute of Virology. A few hundred meters from the market is another laboratory conducting research on coronaviruses, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. But a study involving 41 infected people, believed to have been infected in December 2019 in Wuhan, showed that about a third of them had nothing to do with this market. In order to find patient 02, indicators must be taken into account. The similarity of the genome between SARS-CoV-2 and its closest relative, Rat13, is 96.2%. It seems very close, but from the point of view of evolutionary biology, they are separated by several decades. If the virus was indeed naturally transmitted to humans, then in order to adapt to human cells, it had to exist for a very long time in the body of an intermediate host. But this hypothetical intermediate host represents a very large gap in the scientists' hypothesis of the natural transmission of the virus. They have been looking for an intermediate host for more than a year with no avail. The second indicator is 99.98%. This is the genetic similarity of the coronaviruses found in the first cohort of infected people. This is a very high indicator, which means that the patient 0 could not have been infected much earlier. The difference is a maximum of several weeks, that is, infection possibly happened in mid-November, but not earlier than October 2019. In any case, this is consistent with some cases of early COVID-19 infection abroad, for example, in Italy or France, which were identified later. Does this time frame speak for or against the laboratory theory? At least it does not rule it out. The US government briefing also says that there is reason to believe that several researchers from the Wuhan Institute got sick in the fall of 2019, before the first known cases of the disease appeared there, but their symptoms fit both COVID-19 and seasonal flu. One very early case was reported last year by the South China Morning Post. The article referred to a 55-year-old man from Hubei province as patient 0. However, this case has never been confirmed by the Chinese authorities. Ultimately, based on genome analysis, the researchers suggest that the virus was transmitted to humans as a result of a single event, whether it was an accident in a laboratory or contact with an animal in nature. This still remains a mystery. In a recent letter to the journal Science, leading infectious disease experts have condemned the World Health Organization for its failure to properly investigate whether COVID-19 leaked from a laboratory. In a highly significant move, 18 scientists from the world's top universities, including Cambridge, Harvard, and Yale, have demanded further investigations into the origins of the pandemic. They wrote that theories of accidental release from a lab and zoonotic spillover from animals to humans both remain viable, and more investigation is needed to determine the origin of the pandemic. Knowing how COVID-19 emerged is critical for informing global strategies to mitigate the risk of future outbreaks. I hope you have found this short video useful. In the description there are links to the sources used for the creation of this video. If you liked this video and would like me to make more videos, please support me on Patreon, the link is here and in the description. If you want to see a video about COVID virus and COVID vaccines, please click on these links. If you would like me to speak about more medical conditions, please leave your suggestions in the comments.